Is the thought of buying your next dream home and selling the home that you currently live in keeping you up at night? Do you sell first and then buy? Do you buy first and then sell? Do you get pre-approved, or will you even get qualified to do this process? How does it all work? Well, my name is Aaron White. I'm a realtor with the A-List team, and in this video we're going to be sharing with you all of the tips and tricks that we've learned by serving our clients over the years in getting this exact problem solved. We'll make it super simple. We find that if you have the right step-by-step plan, all you got to do is follow step 1 to get to step 2. In this video, we're going to break it down into 2 simple sections. One is budgeting for this move, and second is planning. Of course, in the budgeting phase, you've already identified, hey, you want a different house, maybe different neighborhood, different features, but we need to figure out what is the feasibility of it and what are the options that you ultimately have going forward. So step 1 is getting a pre-approval. Talk to your lender, your most important player, to give you an idea of what options are presentable for you. Once you have a pre-approval letter, we'll be able to set up a search for you to help you find some properties that meet that criteria in that neighborhood that you want, that dream home, the next step. When you have a few properties in mind, your realtor and your lender can work together to give you an estimate on what your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance would cost at that new property, otherwise known as PITI. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance are basic costs that you will have in any mortgage. And it'll also get you an idea of how much money you need to bring down as a down payment, because now that's all mapped out on your pre-approval letter. Your realtor will also run a market report on the property that you currently own and you currently live in. With that market report, we'll get an estimate of ranges that we could potentially sell your house in that current market. Your realtor can then prepare what's called a net sheet. A net sheet, simply put, is after you sell the house, how much money will I walk away with as a seller? After realtor commissions, after paying title insurance, after maybe negotiations, so on and so forth, all those little line items that show up on a closing disclosure at the end, how much money will you walk away with? Now you're armed with both costs of a new home, what that would be, and also what you might walk away with from your old home. And that'll help us with the planning phase that we need to move towards, which is, do you sell first and then buy? Do you buy first and then sell? There's a few different things we've seen clients do over the years, and that's what we'll share with you here in this next section, the planning section. So we'll cover first is the buy first and then sell, because it's really the easiest. Of course, people do this because they love the convenience of being able to move all their things over, make the house ready, have it listed properly, so on and so forth. It makes showing the house, of course, a lot less inconvenient because they're not living in that house anymore. However, there are added costs to it. You do ultimately have maybe a few extra months of mortgage payments you'll be making on both homes, and you'll have to come up with some cash to be able to make the down payment without the proceeds of that other house. So those are the cons that go to this scenario. Keep in mind that even if you do buy first and then sell, it doesn't mean that your mortgage will always be much higher given that you didn't use the proceeds from your previous house. I've seen other people buy a house and then a few months later or a year later refinance that house with a bunch of cash they made from the sale of their home, ultimately bringing that mortgage back down. Another option might be recasting your mortgage. Not every lender will allow you to do this, but some lenders will allow you to basically make a large cash down payment and they recast your loan amount. They don't change the term, so you'll still be maybe around that 30-year mark or 29-year mark, but essentially you take a bunch of cash that you made and then you put it into that loan and they recast what your monthly payment will be. Of course, talking to the bank will be important to understand if they allow that and what are the terms that they have. They may have a waiting period that they require. They may have a minimum amount of cash that they require, and talking to your lender will be a critical part at that time. The second option that we want to look at is selling your house first and using the money from that sale to buy the next purchase. Now, in an ideal situation, you would fully sell that house, know that all that money is there, and then start the search and then buy a house. But you might have a couple months where you're either renting a long-term or short-term rental in order to find that next house, and those costs are things that you need to ultimately take into account. If you're looking at a way to shorten that, there's 2 other good options and 1 really bad option on how to go about finding that next property. What we want to avoid first, let's start with that, right? So here we have a contract to ultimately sell your house and walk away with some money, and then a contract to ultimately buy that next place. Now, what we don't want to do is get our house under contract to sell, and then all of a sudden, this buyer backs out. If they back out, that's not good. We don't want that. Now, what we don't want to have happen is you're under contract to sell, you think you're good, so you make a contract with no contingencies to go buy a house, and you can't back out of that contract, right? Because if this guy does back out because either they have a contingency or for one reason or another, this doesn't happen very often, but for one reason or another, they don't pull through. Let's just say they get fired. They don't have any control. They're not able to close on the house, right? Then there could be a lot of costs that you have, especially if you have to get out of your contract because that house didn't go through. It could be very messy. And although you do get some earnest money from that buyer that you get to keep, it doesn't cover the costs of moving, the costs you incur, and there are liabilities that you could incur by not fulfilling your contract to purchase that home. You don't want to get sued or fall into any kind of legal trouble because of that. So it's better to protect yourself with contingencies. And there's two types of contingencies that you can cover yourself with that ultimately lead towards getting the house without having to pay those if that scenario did occur. So one of the cleanest and most simple ways to get this house purchased using the proceeds of this one and not risking it is to simply set the option period to a time after your potential sale, right? So in other words, here you have the option to back out of the purchase of this home without losing your earnest money if for any reason you decide, right? And if that option period is set to a date after the close of your home, then that covers you, and it's just the quickest, simple, cleanest way out of a deal and not losing or being liable for the purchase of this home. But what happens if this potential seller over here for your dream home that you found doesn't agree to a really long option period, or they want to know that you're going to move forward much sooner, right? Well, in that case, we can have this contingent, the contract can be written so that it's contingent on that sale, right? So you can still have that maybe 5 or 7 day option period for that inspection as a normal contract might have. And if the sale does not go through, you can back out of the purchase of this property. Now, you're guessing this correct. This will work much better in a buyer's market. If it's a seller's market and prices are going up and they're getting a lot of offers, it's not very likely that this offer will be accepted. It becomes a little bit harder to get across the table because they have other offers without that contingency. And they'd rather accept an offer without a contingency maybe than even having the maximum price. So keep that in mind as you do this. But essentially here, if this transaction did not go through, it would cover you so that you could back out of that transaction. And that's the best way to keep yourself covered in that scenario. So if you're thinking about selling your house and buying your next house, reach out to us on our website, give us a call, and we'll be able to set up an appointment to kind of walk you through these steps. Again, getting that pre-approval and finding the property, getting an estimate and budget in place of what that next property might cost you are the first steps. From there, we can help you evaluate, is it better to sell and ultimately buy the next place? Or can we look at buying potentially and then refinancing and bringing our payment down the road? There's a lot of good options out there. It's really about what works for you, what can you get pre-approved for, and do you have the cash to make the option you want to move forward in a manner that works. Hope that helps. We'll see you at the closing table.